Next on the agenda is to review the Jan Roncelli Safety Path Millage Renewal Proposal, and Director Olivia Olson-Budry is here.
Okay, so good evening. So we're here to talk about the Jan Roncelli Safety Path and the proposed millage renewal. As you're aware, the first millage was passed in 1998. At that time, shortly after the millage was passed, the master plan was developed in 1999, updated in 2008, and then again in 2018. The safety path system is quite large. It consists of over 70 miles of safety path. Along with that is roughly 82,000 square feet of retaining walls, 25,000 feet of fencing, and approximately 1,180 ramps at road intersections. This is a map of the existing path being in black lines. The red dashed lines and the numbers are the proposed routes in the master plan. The green sections are the proposed routes for construction in this season. In fact, we've completed 17 and 15, which is the section on Telegraph and Lasser Road between 14 Mile and Lincoln. And the rest of this year consists of filling in some gaps on Woodward Avenue south of Big Beaver, and then also extending the path on the east side of Telegraph Road from Hickory Grove up to Franklin. And then the blue section is the TAP grant, which addresses connectivity of the path system at the intersection of Square Lake and Telegraph, which has been difficult over the years, including, and this project would include 2 crossings on Telegraph, as well as connecting basically that northwest corner to the rest of the system that the township has. Looking at costs for the remaining master plan paths is approximately $15,800,000. A couple weeks ago, or maybe it was a couple months ago, time flies, I was here for the ADA compliance master plan, which looked at all of our road crossing sections with the safety path and what intersections and the ADA, what intersections complied with the ADA program. That master plan identified that approximately just over $5 million worth of work to bring the existing path into compliance. We also have an annual repair program, which consists of concrete repairs. And then we also have a retaining wall program. The retaining wall program doesn't happen on an annual basis. Right now we're running about every other year where we generate enough locations in a big enough project to take on repairing, replacing, and in some cases removing the retaining walls. And then also we have annual maintenance costs not related to construction. This would be mowing the grass along the path, cleaning the path itself with debris and leaves and sediment, fixing some fences. We have in-house staff. The DPW is able to do some fence repairs. We also have staff covered under for their work associated with the safety path program, and then the associated staff costs. And all these costs are based on 2022 dollars. So in general, and I say general because depending on the scope of the project, the amount of repairs that we have, these numbers do fluctuate. So I'm talking about on a general 5-year trend because this is a 5-year millage. The general trend is to allocate $1.1 million for new safety path. Now that may fluctuate some years where we want to do a certain program that maybe is more than that. So we will do a smaller program one year and a larger program the next year. The last couple of years we've been wanting to bring down our reserves, so they've been some larger projects. But in general, this is what we go for. And then approximately $400,000 per year being the combined concrete and retaining wall repair and replacement program. But like I said, we don't necessarily do a retaining wall program every year, so this is just kind of averaging the costs between the two. We always do concrete repair for slabs every year. And then approved by the board when we brought the ADA compliance plan to the board was allocating $500,000 a year to bring the existing path crossings up to compliance, and then approximately $200,000 per year for other safety costs, which would be in-house expenses for brush removal, mowing the path, the grass adjacent to the paths, fence repair, removing the debris. For instance, if we get calls from residents, if there's brush hanging over, I just got one today where a resident reached out to us concerned about some vegetation hanging over a path. It was blocking the path. That's something that our in-house staff would either address, or we would have a contractor address that to clear it. And so that's the other component of it. So I think later on the agenda, the board will be voting on the millage language, but in the presentation, I just included it for reference, but it is to be addressed by the board later on the agenda. So up for consideration later on the agenda is to continue the Safety Path program with a request for a millage renewal. And the date for consideration by the voters for including the language on the ballot would be for the November 8th, 2022 election. That pretty much wraps it up for me.
Anyone want to start with questions?
Just one question.
Yeah.
Can you address, Olivia, how the ADA compliance requirements have changed since the inception of the program? And actually, there have been many changes, but how have they changed and when did they change?
I apologize, I don't have the dates down, but ADA was, the program I think was developed in the 90s, but it wasn't until 2010 where the guidelines were provided. And so most of our ADA compliance areas are past that, are before that 2010 timeline. Where we were actually given the guidance on what are the goals that we need to meet to make this path accessible for all. So most of the compliance program, we're starting in the older areas first. The area that was slated for this year was in like the southwestern corner of the township, which was some of the earlier path and a small section on Squirrel Road. Unfortunately, we attempted to take bids for the ADA compliance program this year, and we received 0 bids. My goal is to expand the program for next year, add in the work that we had scheduled for this year into the work that we have planned for next year, and hopefully get our requests for bids out as early as possible. But it's an unfortunate non-surprise, because we, as you're aware, we have only been receiving 1 bid for the Safety Path Repair Program as well as the 2022 Safety Path Program this year.
Thank you.
And then also it's surprising to some that it's not grandfathered in. I know some people had reached out to me by email asking why we're fixing old paths because they're grandfathered, but do you want to talk about how that's not true? That you do have to actually change things and make things safe for people?
Yeah, I mean, the township owns this asset.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure our asset is maintained and accessible for all. And our attorney was shaking his head about it being grandfathered in. And so hence us having a program where we can start addressing these on a larger scale.
Well, in one of the previous meetings, that's how we came up with the 500,000 per year, because we only have so many years to come into compliance. So that's trying to get us on that proper path to be able to have that completed in the right time frame.
I'm not aware of a deadline per se, but the fact that we have a program available, we have a study, we're moving forward to address these, is why we're moving forward with that.
I just have one question. So you said that the guidelines were released in 2010. Is that something that they're like updating regularly? Is it something like we could see changes again down the line? Or, I mean, that's probably a hard question for you, because you can't foresee what they're going to do, but.
I would have to reach out to people who are more in touch with the ADA for a response on that. I apologize. I don't have a good response for that.
And the only reason why I'm asking is because obviously oh, sure, sorry about that. We're looking at a 10-year a time period here, so obviously it's like we don't want to do the work and then something else comes up that we'll have to address, so.
Yeah.
But I understand the liability issues and why we have to be in compliance, so thank you, Olivia.
Another thing too on the ADA, some people had reached out and said, well, it shouldn't cost that much to just put these pads at the end. Do you want to highlight how that's not what ADA is? It's actually changing the slope for wheelchairs to come, it's not
Yeah.
just the orange pad at the end.
Yeah, definitely. There's certain requirements when we approach an intersection with the slope of the path or the grade of the path. There's restrictions that we've been constructing the path for quite a while to meet. For instance, being less than an 8% grade, and when you get to a crossing, there has to be a flat landing for people to safely be able to rest and not move without their own will. And so it is more than just putting the terracotta colored truncated domes, the textured spots. Some of the locations we have simply need just that, but some locations do require that we go back farther up the path to make it flatter, which in some cases where the existing grade is steeper, we may have to add some retaining walls to maintain the natural grade and drop the path down. So each location has to be considered individually. So without a doubt, there are some locations that simply need the truncated domes, what they're called, the coloring, but other locations will need significant amount more work to bring the grade of the path into compliance, so there is a flat space for people to stop at before crossing the road. And then also, this project includes bringing the pedestrian signals into compliance. You know, if you walk around, you may see where the push buttons may be located on a pole or existing light pole instead of on a separate post within so many inches of the path. So those will have to be brought into compliance as well. So each location, the report did break out the compliance locations with signalization and without signalization. So some of those locations, once we wrap in signalization, would cost more than other locations where we have to do very minimal work.
Trying to think of any other questions that have come. Another one has come up of why is this 5 instead of 10? And part of that is so that it's a renewal, not a new, but also gives us a chance if things change, to Trustee Faki's point, it allows us to adjust, but also eventually get to the point where it would lower and become just an operating once the new paths are done, once the ADA is done, we'd be able to actually rein this into an operating millage type. Are there other reasons why you might have
I'm not
suggested
aware of the
5?
history of why a 5-year versus a 10-year. That certainly is something I should look into. I don't know the history of why, because I think most of our other millages are a longer period than the 5-year.
Right. Any other questions from any of the board? I look for, oh, no, we're not on this one. Never mind.
Okay.
Thank you for your help.
Thank you.
on this. Again, this is, public comment has ended.